So heads up, everyone is now recorded. So if you are not interested in being recorded, feel free to drop and we can share the recording out to you a little later. All right, so this content is all about the change management aspect of things and how do you help take all the learning that we have from the technology side and ensure that people are able to adapt to the changes that are coming. And the way we think about change management doesn't relate just to technology. It relates to any change that you're undergoing. So this could even be some transformational ideas to help you transform, maybe the decisions that you're making in your family or things that happen outside of technology. So actually, give me 1 second. It looks like the wrong deck is displayed. Hold on 1 second here. Give it one more go. Okay, should be right now. So that'll be the foundation for the conversation, how to instill change and make it lasting. And when you think about the change that Microsoft went through, it is pretty massive. Our mission previously, and might be something that you've heard of from the Bill Gates era of having a PC on every desktop in every workplace, in every home. And that mission was very technology driven, very product driven, very Microsoft business driven. And we've shifted that culture from being a technology and product driven organization to being about the people that we serve. And so now, instead of saying we want a PC on every desktop in every home, we now want to empower every person and every organization in the planet to achieve more. And that is way bigger than just having technology. So earlier in the week, we were having this discussion of what is it that the people that you're serving want to do and want to accomplish. This is tapping into that. And so by talking about and having our mission be more centered around our customers and what they want to accomplish, we're able to drive our revenues and to help increase profits for Microsoft by making sure that we are focused and centered on what our customers want, not just what Microsoft wants. And so by having that as our mission and our focus, you see that woven throughout almost everything that we do, even down to hiring. Well, now people can feel empowered by being here, that they know that the work that they're doing has a bigger mission than just selling another copy of Office or just rolling on another customer to Office 365. It's greater than that. It's helping American Red Cross save lives. It's helping making sure that we have more volunteers in the world that can support our country when we have natural disasters like the floods that are happening this week, like the tornadoes that are happening in Dallas. And so I'd like us to center on that, on the mission of the people that we're serving, not just about the technology. So when we look at transformations and how they happen, it's this trifecta that we all know is there: people, process, and technology. For the most part, where I focus and where I have experiences around the people side of change, we heard from several different presenters throughout the day talking about the technology side of change, talking a little bit about process. I don't focus there. As a customer success manager, I am focused on people. And so when it comes to the time for a conversation around, well, how do we kind of think through the technology components of that change, I have to bring in my peers like we've seen earlier this week. And when we think through that transformation and thinking through the people side of change, it is really about people. So without the people focus, all of that technology discussion that we just had doesn't happen. So all of the transformation, all of the use of those documents, all of the sharing of those documents that help the business get more effective doesn't happen unless people adapt to the change that's required and help them get familiar with how do these tools make them more effective in their day-to-day lives. The foundation that we base that off of, this whole people side of change framework, is really from ProSci. And ProSci is an organization that has been in existence for over 20 years. And what ProSci stands for is professional sciences. That organization was founded to do research on the people side of change. And they've spent the last 20 plus years really studying what does people change look like and what are the components necessary to instill and drive effective change management. Through those studies, that 20 years of research, they've come up with a model that seems to be pretty proven through all of their research and all of the success that they've had. That model is called the ADKAR model. And you might hear this model in several different spaces, but it is driven by ProSci. And what it says is that in order to have any effective change, every component of this ADKAR model needs to be present. And each of these ADKAR components, the A, D, K, A, and R, are serial. So in order to have effective change, you need to start with A and then move your way down to R. And then before you get to R, you have to make sure that all the other components are there, or you might have gaps in your plan. So what does this mean? Let's break it down and kind of look at it in its entirety. So the A for awareness is helping people to understand why this change is happening. We don't want to just throw something on them and say, oh, we've got a tool that's going to be great for you. You're going to be able to do these different things. But they need to understand, why is the company moving to this new technology? What's the benefit? What's the larger picture here? And we want to make sure that we start the conversation there. We move into D of desire, which is not just about why the organization is moving. Why have we chosen this technology? Sort of like the conversation around why American Red Cross picked Office 365 that we had earlier in the week. But now, what's in it for me? Why do I make the decision to use this technology? How is it going to improve my working life? What are the scenarios that are going to make me more successful in my day-to-day life that talk about the mission and how they can be more effective? Then we move down to K, which is knowledge. And this is where many folks start and stop the conversation. We deploy a product and then we say, here's training to use the product, to go have at it. And that typically does not lead to the degree of change that's possible. Knowledge is important, but we don't want to start and stop there. And the knowledge component is talking about training. It's, how do I do the behavior that you're telling me will make me more effective or efficient in my job? And then once that has been acknowledged, then you want to talk to some ability. Okay, well, how have these folks shown the capability and ability to perform the task that we're asking? If we're talking about Teams, are we measuring usage in Teams? If we're talking about Skype, are we measuring the number of phone calls made from Skype? For reinforcement, you're then coming back in to say, now that we know all these other components are there, how do I make sure that the behavior continues? How do I make sure that even after the first call was made, the second call was made, how do I make sure that they plan to use that phone ongoing, not just this week because it's fresh and hot, but moving on into later months after maybe the excitement day or the buzz day has gone away? And so once you start to do that, you want to then build in success criteria and know what are the foundations of this program that you're trying to launch. How do you say when this program is successful? Are you building in specific KPIs that measure the success of the product or the success of the change? And then do you start to maybe excel that KPI, not just into success of the product, but moving up the stack to how does the success of the product help influence the business? And can you measure that? And we'll talk through a few scenarios that might be relevant for you. When you're coming up with those success metrics, you want to think about all the components of the change. Who's changing? What's the desired change? Are there changes to compensation? Are there changes to behavior? Are there geographical changes that are happening? And really understand, what is this change impact going to have on people? And then once you've understood that, then you can also start to build out some different metrics of success that measure the performance of the technology that you're adopting based on the scope of change that this will have for the organization. And so we'll take a deeper look into some of the success metrics and how you might flow that. So if we're looking at the very, very bottom here, these are typically the baseline foundations of change, right? So how have we enabled these users to change? And the way you might measure that is by a number of access, or number of times people have made a click on the training tool. So how many times have people opened up the brainstorm training that you provided for them? And is that the early sort of idea of success? Are people even taking advantage of the training opportunities that we have? Have they engaged with us on the awareness components, on the communication messages? Have people reached out after we sent an email saying, hey, we're moving from Skype to Teams, and now you will be able to have better communication? And are people responding and saying, yeah, this is great, we're looking forward to it? Are they not responding? Are they dull? And using that early activity as a measure of success, and having some sort of metric that you're looking for to identify if this is successful or not. Then you start to move up the stack and say, okay, well, now that this is out there, they're aware it's coming, they've used the training tools, but are they using the actual product? And so you might have some sort of active usage percentage or target number that you're looking for in terms of a KPI. And then we keep going up this stack in terms of value. Are they happy with it? They're using it, but what's the sentiment? Do you have some sort of survey that you can test the audience on and gauge their interest in using the product? So this is tapping into some desire components as well. And then we keep moving up into process adoption. And so now that they've either determined that they're happy or unhappy with it, are you seeing that there is a process shift? So now that they've moved, for example, from maybe WebEx to Skype for Business or Teams, is there some sort of process that improves? Are there some sort of business values that can be remedied from that? If we take it to a physical meeting to Teams, that's pretty clear, right? So people are no longer having in-person meetings where they have to fly all over the country to meet up with each other, and they're using Skype or Teams to do that, saving them budgetary cost. And so the process is, now we're not traveling all over the country, we're not booking flights, we're doing all of this process through Teams. And so my process has changed, but now I've also shifted up into business value. Maybe I have reduced expenses for the organization from expenses on T&E, and we can shift that over to expenses on the on the disaster relief side, and maybe we can buy more meals or whatever, because we have a significant reduction in the travel cost. So if you think of that value chain, you can see how you can move from a technology adoption into true business value with the way you measure success. And so I had a conversation earlier with one of the volunteers who is doing fantastic work in North Carolina. Matt is very familiar with her, Evelyn Voss, and she actually brought to us a scenario. Matt, I hope it's okay that I'm sharing this. If you're anti, just give me a shout and I'll cut it out. But she brought to us a scenario where she was out in a few different volunteer centers, and she recognized that there were some folks out there that were using WebEx. WebEx has a significant difference in cost over what the cost is for Skype at this point. Not only is that a case, but they're also limited in the number of bridges that they have, the number of people that can join this WebEx bridge. And in those conversations, she realized that because of the limitation on the number of people they can call, this volunteer services group who is reaching out to folks that have been approved through the screening process and are ready to go on to become volunteers for American Red Cross, they have to go to this next step of being trained and going through some sort of virtual training that allows them to then go on and become a full-fledged volunteer. Because of this backlog and being able to contact multiple people at one time, they are going through and only working with about 8 people, roughly, at a time in these, I'm assuming about 1-hour sessions because of the limitation in WebEx. What Evelyn realized is that if we can go to these people and say, okay, you can talk to 250 volunteers at the same time on these WebEx, I'm sorry, on a Skype bridge, we can now significantly increase the amount of people that you can pull through the volunteer pipeline. And the reason why that was so impactful was because the volunteer backlog is about 3,000 people long. So they've got 3,000 people long of a backlog that are people that are trying to get through this process of being screened through this training. And that backlog dates all the way back to Hurricane Florence, which was almost over a year ago, not to mention new volunteers that are coming in every day. And so when we think about the value of technology and how that gets all the way to the mission, if we were just measuring the user adoption of Skype or Teams, that would not help us get to the mission and the impact at Red Cross. But if we could take that all the way from, we are helping you with transformation by using these different tools that give you access to an increased pool of people. We are allowing you to host meetings virtually and allowing you to increase the number of people that you can talk at one time. By doing that, we move up the stack. We talk about response time. I can now decrease the amount of time it takes you to onboard a group of people. By decreasing that volunteer onboard time, I can now increase available volunteers. And now, by doing that, I can increase the number of meals provided and served, smoke alarms installed, the true mission impact that the people that you're serving are looking for. And so if you can start to shift the thinking of, we don't just serve tools, but we truly impact the mission, I think you can help influence your customers and help serve them and help them adopt the technologies that are required. Now, I don't have a slide that I'm showing here to demonstrate this, but if we think about digital transformation, it began all the way back at the invention of the wheel. And since the invention of the wheel, we have gotten significantly better with the increases in technology. And those increases in technology have significantly made impacts on how we do business today. Everything from digital access, so to being able to talk today. So if we didn't have the wheel, I might not have this PC here with me to talk to you at the speed of time that I do. If we didn't have the wheel, we wouldn't have the airplane. So just think through that everything that you do has impacts, even though it's just technology, or it may seem like just a click or just a phone. There are impacts in the business that are significant for American Red Cross. So if I dive a little bit deeper and I start to think about the success factors and how Microsoft pulls all of that together in ways that we support our customers, there's 4 key components. One is stakeholders. We really have to have leadership on board to help us drive the message of the change that's coming, to be the sponsor that is there and visible throughout this change for the end user community. And we want those stakeholders to be present and active throughout the entire change process. So we don't want them to just initially send out a message and say, hey, we're moving, and walk away. We want stakeholders and the stakeholders group of folks to be there enforcing the change. And so if I give a scenario that kind of walks all of this through, for Microsoft, if we were, or when we were transitioning from Skype to Teams, I might have gotten an email from my CEO, Satya Nadella, saying, hey, we are moving to Teams. We are noticing there is a shift in the generational gap in the environment. There are now more generations working in one workforce than there has ever been before. Because of that, multiple people need to work in multiple different ways. Different generations have different ways of how they consume information. And we are also finding that competitors are building solutions that address that need. We need to also be able to address the market in that way. And for that reason, we have created Teams. You will have the access to use Teams. It will be a one app where you can do multiple things in one location, where you can create chats with your peers. You can create calls and messages, and maybe it will help reduce the clutter that you have in email, making your job a little bit easier. I've provided some training links where we worked with our training teams to have to give you access to how to use this tool, and I look forward to you using it. Now, from that mail, I may or may not have changed my behavior. I may have looked at the email and said, Satya, you know what, that's really cool, that's great. I'm glad Microsoft is making these investments and we're staying ahead of the curve, or maybe making sure that we're staying relevant. But you know what, so what? I'm just going to keep emailing my folks. I'm going to keep working on Skype. Now, that's one stakeholder in that conversation. I might, following after that, get an email from my direct manager saying, if you are to communicate with me from here on out, I will only be accepting responses from my team on Teams. I will no longer be accepting responses from Skype, and any documents that we share back and forth together will only be shared in Teams. I will not be accepting your reports or any documents that you share with me through email or any other form. I am likely to change my behavior. And so what we see there is it's not just the executive stakeholder, but it's the middle level managers that we need on board to help enforce the change and ensuring that the change is moved along. And so within that example, you did also hear some of these other three components, which were scenarios. In the early email, Satya made it relevant to me about why I should change and move to Teams. One, I had one tool that I could work with in my communications, and maybe I can reduce email, which is a burden for me. So those scenarios were there to drive it home for me why this tool would make my life better. And then awareness, it was an email campaign. I knew why the company was making a decision to move to Teams, why it was relevant for the business, not just for me as a user. And then you saw the training links there that were there from the training division to help make sure that I was able to use the solution. And so making sure that all of these factors in conjunction with AdCar are the ways that we see customers being successful with deploying on a change. And that doesn't have to be one change at a time. It could be multiple changes that are happening. But whatever it is that you're changing, you want to make sure that those components are present for your group. Now, the rest of my slides start to get deep into, or I shouldn't say deep, but deeper into these individual components, stakeholder scenarios, awareness, and training. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go there. I will make sure that these slides are available for you for later consumption. But I'll leave you with a few things before we get into questions and then following up on the rest of the agenda. When you are working through a change, these are the 5 questions that you need to make sure you are answering. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And the problem isn't just that you have not enough phone calls being made. The problem should be a business and a mission-driven problem. What is it that you're trying to solve from a mission, and how can you solve that with technology? What does success look like for you? And again, not just success from a technology standpoint, that's important, but what does success look like for the organization? And then how do different units, business units, define success for workloads? And that might be, are they able to collaborate and communicate together? Are they able to do things quicker? And that might take some intelligence in reaching out into your business units to discover. Have you addressed technology and business challenges as well as train the end users? So that's sort of 3 components there. Is the technology addressed? Is the business challenge addressed? And have these end users been trained or will they be trained on the technology? That can be a future-looking statement, and it can also be a previous history statement or question where you're saying, how have we done this in the past? How has it been successful, or how has it failed? And what do we want to accomplish in this next change? And then lastly, how do you define adoption for your organization, and what impact do you want to create today? And so I would ask you, as you're having different changes that you're going through, different technology adoption that you're looking to roll out, whether it's something as little as security changes that could make major impacts on how people access content via their mobile devices, or something as large as adopting a telephone system. Think through these questions to help ground you in what is important for the business, what's important for technology, and then what's important for your end users. And then to close it all out, I'll leave you with sort of the path to adoption. How do you get there? We've walked through much of this today, but the four key components are making sure that you identify stakeholders, identify people that can deliver the message that everyone responds to. And that earlier sort of example, when I mentioned I got an email from my CEO, I know exactly who my CEO is. If anyone walking down the street asked me who my CEO is, I can tell him. If anyone asks me who's my direct manager, I obviously can tell him. If someone asks me who my CIO is, I have not one clue. I honestly don't know. I could probably look it up and find it. I don't know who that person is, that one CIO is. And so I would charge you, as you're identifying key stakeholders, make sure that that stakeholder is somebody that the population that you're looking to influence identifies with. You want to identify different and prioritize business scenarios, making sure that the scenarios that you identify with are of value to the individuals that you're looking to influence. If I was looking to influence a disaster team or a disaster relief team, and I'm talking to them about communication and how they can work better together, that's likely to be something that they respond to. If I'm talking to a disaster relief team and I'm talking to them about how to better use Excel spreadsheets and reduce budgets, they may or not be concerned. And so making sure that the priorities that you identify with are the priorities of your audience. Create a success plan. There are some Microsoft success plans that are available at Fast Track. And so if any of you at any time want to walk through what those look like, I can help you. It's walking through some questions that help you determine what are the success metrics that you're looking for and putting those in paper. And then the last thing is executing on that plan and making sure that you've identified those key components that we talked about: stakeholders, awareness, training, and scenarios. And then keep that change going. Find a way to have reinforcement of the change that you've enforced, and that when you drop a change, you don't want to leave it. You want that change to be lasting. You want that change to be ongoing. And so you will have to have some sort of reinforcement processes in place. Maybe that's a communication strategy. Maybe that's building up a champions group and having them constantly supporting the population. There's several things that you can do, but you want to make sure that something's done. So this ends my portion of the presentation in terms of change management and building lasting and enabling change. I'll open it up to questions on this side of the content around change management. All right, does anyone have any questions out there?
Hey, question. I'm getting feedback though. I don't know if that's when somebody's on a speaker or not muted, but.
You sound great to me.
No, I'm hearing myself back.
So you're hearing yourself.
Somebody's using their laptop speaker instead of a headset or something like that, getting reverb. Okay, that's better. So no question, but 2 points. One is I hope everybody will become familiar with and use the ADKAR model. I think it's logical, makes a lot of sense. And in talking about metrics, if you were to look back at some of those examples, and they're good examples, you have to be able to discern, though, the action that you are working towards, how much of that is really attributable to a rise or fall in any of these things. So it's not enough just to measure, the overall increase in the number of meals delivered, for example, or smoke alarms installed, but you need to be able to directly tie your actions to that, and not to just assume that we did this around the same time all this was going on, but we need to be able to have a valid attribution in place. And then the other thing related to the ADKAR model is you need to factor in the indirect impacts of your actions as well, because too often we get focused on what we as IT professionals believe we've got a box we need to check off because the industry says it's the best thing to do. But to your point about is it what the stakeholders really need? And is it something that we've explained to them thoroughly to where they buy into it as well? And then we've thought through all the indirect impacts and ramifications of our actions as well. And as IT professionals, I'm convinced that we too often don't do a good enough job of that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And Dave, I'll tell you, Red Cross isn't unique in that. This idea of focusing on change management is relatively new, and it's new because of where we are in the cloud. If I just think through the history of Microsoft and all across the IT, it's not just us. We've been able to survive off of selling big major server deals that were large investments that a customer would pay, finance over 3 years, and then they'd be done. And that server may last them a couple years. They renew the licenses every couple years. But now in this cloud world that is not just at Microsoft, it's pervasive throughout the entire industry. All of the technologies are there and they are used or pay for what you use. You're sometimes on a monthly billing, especially if it's a smaller business. And so the customer is expecting that they will use it or lose it. And they don't have to hang on to it because it was a massive investment. They can put it in the back corner. And so now we have to be really, really sort of there with our customers to make sure that they're using it and with them along the way, because they don't have to use it. And so the same for ARC in terms of investments. If you're purchasing technologies and you're finding that they're not valuable to the customer, maybe you're starting to consider whether those technologies are being used, if the customer is finding value of it, did you make the right decision? And so we're here to help you along that journey to make sure that you've made an investment in Microsoft. We want you to value that investment in Microsoft and keep it going. And so I think that same shift can happen with our customers as well. Well, thank you everybody for the time. And Dave, I appreciate your comments around what you shared on the change management piece. If there are no other questions, I'll kind of pause. Are there more questions? Let me ask. Okay, I'll open it up as a follow-up for the full day. Is there anybody out there that wants to give us feedback on the last 3 days, whether this has been valuable for you or not, or things that you've learned?
Hey, so this is Matt. I will speak up and say it has been very valuable to me and hopefully to individuals from my team who have attended. Definitely learning, and we have, like with Tawanda, we're going to take a little deeper dive into analytics at the talent level, and with Michael on the sharing. So very beneficial to me. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Any other comments out there?
Hey, I think it's been helpful as well. I hope others have also. I know that one of the things that if we do this again next time, it would be helpful to have the Microsoft team really kind of focus on upfront knowing what we have, and to be sure to separate the information that's being conveyed as let's talk about what you have and how to maximize and optimize it. And oh, by the way, once you have done that, here are some additional layers that you don't own, but these are the possibilities. And so getting clarity around what you have and how to get value out of what you've already acquired before going into what you could do, and what you could do if you spent even more money, I think would be further valuable.
Okay, thank you. I accept that feedback, and we'll make sure that the rest of the team takes that to mind. Is there anything that we missed in this discussion over the last 3 days that is something that you were interested in hearing, or maybe over the last 3 days since the discussion you were looking to hear something additional? Okay, perfect. So it looks like this schedule works for you. Would you be interested in having this as a recurring discussion where this isn't just a once a year conversation, but maybe once every 2 years to make sure that you're up to date on where we are with all of these technologies as they change? Is a biannual roadmap discussion something that you'd be interested in?
I think it would be smart.
Okay. All right, we can set that up. I know everyone has their list of follow-ups that's on the Microsoft team. Everyone that's out there from Microsoft, is there anything that you'd like to relay out to Red Cross and team?
Hey Asia, this is Tawanda. I just want to let you guys know, Matt, I'll be reaching out to you and Dave for your availability to get those follow-up meetings scheduled directly.
Thanks, Tawana. You can leave Dave off, but if you reach out to me, I'll ensure that the appropriate individuals are in attendance. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Awesome. Any other Microsoft folks have anything for Red Cross? All right. Before we drop, any last comments from anyone from Red Cross? Any questions that are out there that are lingering you want to get answered? Okay, well, it looks like I can give everyone a few minutes back. I'll say thank you very much for dedicating the time and committing to these last 3 days. Dave, thank you for your sponsorship for this. I think it was actually brilliant to have us split this up in 3 different days at 2 hours. So thank you for the leadership there. And we will try to have this in another 6 months to keep you up to date and fresh and make sure that we follow up on all of the different follow-up activities that were requested.
Okay, thank you, Asia.
Thanks all. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.